A historic geomagnetic storm is set to impact Earth as early as tonight.
So what causes it and what impacts could we experience? Meteorologist Rachel Dunsing breaks it down.
For the first time since 2005, the Space Weather Prediction Center has issued a geomagnetic storm watch for a G4 storm, which is considered a severe storm. So how did this happen? We've had at least 5 coronal mass ejections burst from the sun toward the Earth. So a coronal mass ejection, or a CME, is an explosion of plasma and magnetic fields from the sun. And as they move toward Earth, it can interact with our magnetic field and cause a number of issues, mainly for the sunlit side of the Earth. So with this particular G4, high-frequency radio blackouts are possible for up to a few hours. GPS and other satellite navigation may not work as well, and there are even some power grids, mainly in the northern latitudes, that could have issues with voltage control, and the protective systems may even trip out at times. A G4 can also cause the aurora to be seen a little farther south, possibly as far south as Alabama. But as we take a look at the aurora forecast, the best chance to actually see it with your naked eye is still pretty far from us in North Carolina. However, with long exposure photography, it is technically possible to see the aurora here in North Carolina, but most likely the western part of the state late Friday night and early Saturday morning. I have an in-depth article explaining more on this historic geomagnetic storm. Just find it on CBS17.com. I'm meteorologist Rachel Dunsing.
Exclusive caught on camera. A Portland man's dash cam captured a tense confrontation with a woman armed with a knife. That woman is now accused of damaging several cars and setting one on fire. Earlier today, I talked exclusively to the driver who found himself in the middle of a frightening situation. It was a picture-perfect day in southwest Portland until it turned into a horror movie complete with a rocking soundtrack. A knife-wielding woman blocking the road, threatening Portland resident Chris Campbell.
In the moment, I'm not thinking this is crazy, but after I get away and my heart's still pumping, I'm like, oh my God, what just happened, you know?
Campbell was driving on Southwest 26th near Barber Boulevard when it all unfolded.
I pull up and this lady's like standing like a linebacker, staring at my car. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I have no idea. So I instantly open my glove box, pull out mace, and I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen.
A moment later, the immediate danger sets in and Campbell sprays the woman. But the fumes also seep into his car. In a move he now regrets, Campbell steps out of the car and finds the woman not backing down.
You have a knife? Are you kidding me?
Want to see your kids again?
I'm calling the cops. Get away from me. Get away from my car. Get away from me. Call 911.
Cops are fighting. They're my friends.
Get back.
You said you were
Get back. I mean, she's like 6 feet away with a knife up here, and she keeps kind of doing this while I have mace in her face telling her, get away, stop. Now I'm in a real bad situation because every time I go to get back in the car to get away, she's coming up on me.
Campbell was finally able to drive away, but not before police say Matthews stabbed his car. Matthews is also accused of stabbing another driver's car and setting a parked car on fire. And Campbell is now left to wonder, what if?
I play Monday morning quarterback too, and it's like, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you stop? Why did you get out? So if my kid was in the car, yeah, I would have been gone. This never would have happened. But he wasn't, and I stopped. She came up to me, and it just went from there, you know? I'm not gonna let it go, you know? I feel bad for her. Clearly she's suffering. But, you know, there's gotta be consequences for this stuff.
Portland police responded to the scene and arrested 42-year-old Elishama Matthews. She now faces several criminal charges, including second-degree arson and menacing charges.
Interesting to learn, interesting to find out. The Native American culture holds the total solar eclipse in high reverence. However, there's a different approach to it all. I want to introduce you right now to Debbie Nez-Manuel from the Morningstar Leaders Organization, as well as Freddie Johnson, a Navajo cultural educator, and explain what's supposed to happen in the Native American culture with regard to the solar eclipse.
Well, one of the things that's really important to know is that there are 22 federally recognized tribes in Arizona, and out of these tribes is Navajo Nation, and they are considered to be the largest tribe across the country, and especially in Arizona. So in Arizona, we think about the school districts that are here. There are 58 school districts, and in these school districts, we attract people from around the globe. And when they're coming from around the globe, including tribes here in Arizona, they'll come here because of lack of employment and different reasons. So there's a higher prevalence of Navajo students who are attending school districts. Mesa Public School is one of them. And as we're, as educators are meeting with students, we really want them to be mindful of certain teachings that are really important to tribes. And so as Morningstar Leaders, we're the organization that helps to ensure that our cultural educators are there. They're the subject experts, and we create those opportunities so that they're working with our youth.
Let's talk about that, because I don't want to lose this information. It's important to know, how does the Native American culture hold the solar eclipse in reverence?
The solar eclipse, it's any eclipse that we have, either it's a lunar or a solar eclipse. It's a very, very sacred event, that it's a very powerful thing to view. So because of that, we tell our children and our people not to be in the presence of that eclipse, or to even take a sneak or be outside, because there are many different things that we cannot do during an eclipse. So because it's a very sacred event and it's very powerful, it does have its repercussions, and it can affect the person either health-wise or mentally, and it can happen down the road, maybe a few years on down the road, it can affect them.
You explained to me, this is in your culture a replenishing of the earth, the moon, and the sun.
Yes, it's a rejuvenation, a renewal of, like you mentioned, the earth, the sun, the moon. And they say that's a very sacred event there, and they rejuvenate. As our elders have said in the past, this is a time when everything realigns, and they're getting ready for the next part of the season, which is fall. So in that sense, there's a very special communication between the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon, the universe.
Well, this is great information, and I know they had mentioned, especially for educators out there who have classes participating in this event on Monday, it's important to know that the Native American culture holds this in a different regard, so if those students don't participate. We thank you very much for sharing this information, and glad that we could get it out. Gina?
Update we're getting from police, they say that they have taken another person who was there at the scene. They've taken that person in custody on a mental health hold.
And one of our crews watched the man drive up to the protest scene. This is what happened next. Protesters trying to stop that car. There was also reportedly mace being sprayed out of the car window. The car eventually stops. The driver runs out. You can see him spray protesters as he runs off. The car has since been essentially torn apart and vandalized. It's unclear if it actually belongs to the man who was in it. Police shared that they did take him into custody within the just past hour or so.
And our team coverage continues.
Wash it out. Please, as much as you can. Don't waterboard them. Stop. No, I got her. Let it go! Let it go!
Shut it off.
Thunder.
Shut it off.
Thunder.
Shut it off!
Now to the huge solar storm hitting the Earth's atmosphere. It's millions of miles away, but the eruptions on the sun are bringing the northern lights to regions that rarely see them all over the world. But if you miss this magical phenomena, you might get lucky tonight. CBS's Michael George in New York has his eyes on the sky. Michael.
Well, Robert, quite a show last night, and it's not over yet. But as beautiful as the northern lights are, with a solar storm this large, it has the power to affect things here on Earth, from the power grid to the GPS on your phone.
Oh my God, I was not expecting this.
Breathtaking, otherworldly images from Canada, Ukraine, Switzerland, and England. And across much of the U.S., people witness streaks of pink and purple and green as far south as Florida.
Wow.
Sean Dahl, senior space weather forecaster for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, explains what we're seeing in the skies.
The aurora is when we get energized particles that have left the sun in more quantities than usual, and they interact with Earth's magnetic barrier.
Astrophysicist Noor Rawafi says this is the biggest geomagnetic storm in more than 20 years.
This one is pretty large. I think it's pretty extreme.
It's so large, it can temporarily disrupt satellites we rely on for communication and navigation, like GPS. Elon Musk's Starlink satellites are reporting degraded service. Most of us have GPS on our phones. Is that something that could potentially be disrupted?
Yes, it could, because most of our phones are single-frequency GPS systems.
Aurora Borealis can even impact our power grid and cause blackouts, but utility companies took precautions.
It seems this time around certain steps were taken.
Now, if you didn't get a chance to see Aurora last night, you still have one more shot tonight. Now, it is weather dependent, but experts say your best shot is between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Robert?
Michael, thank you.
Hello YouTube. In the 21st century, we know quite a lot about the influence of the sun on our planet. But in the 20th century, in Russia, lived a man who knew much more than I believe is known today about sun's effects on our planet. And with the recent developments, I think we should hear him out, even though he's long gone. But we do have some of his writings and notes that he left behind. I'm speaking about Alexander Chizhevsky, who lived between 1897 to 1964, who was an outstanding Russian thinker. He was a giant of his country's science. He was also a prisoner in the Soviet concentration camps, in the Gulag. Chizhevsky was the founder of heliobiology, studying the influence of solar activity on biological and social processes and psychic powers, and worked in the areas of experimental biophysics and hematology. He also wrote poetry and literary criticism and taught history and archaeology. His unpublished manuscripts are kept in the archives of the Russian Academy. Good luck trying to get access. Chizhevsky described life on Earth as an echo of the Sun. The Sun, our nearest star, contains approximately 99.8% of the mass in the solar system and has the strongest thermal, electromagnetic, and gravitational influence on our planet. Chizhevsky found many links between the sunspot activity and general health issues. He made intensive studies of the correlation between solar-induced changes in the Earth's magnetic field and the occurrence of physical events. Listen to this, such as epidemics of cholera, diphtheria, typhus, and smallpox. He also firmly believed that signs of human unrest or mass excitement, such as revolutions and mass migrations, followed the sunspot cycle. Using immense historical and statistical material, Chizhevsky showed that solar activity acts as an accelerator and moderator upon the whole biosphere, which manifests in the frequency and magnitude of events of population growth and decline, birth, death, harvests, heart attacks, emergencies, bank crashes, catastrophes, suicides, and more. This is a result of the reaction of the planet's core to the changes in the electromagnetic corona of the Sun. Remember it. I will get back to this. Chizhevsky collected data from 72 countries from the year 600 BC onwards. Because of his research, more is known today about the phenomenon of the geomagnetic field and its influence on biological processes. And another one of Chizhevsky's discoveries was very important too. It had been previously known that an animal or human may suffocate to death even when there is enough oxygen in the air, if something elusive is absent from it. Chizhevsky identified the mysterious substance in the early 1920s. He proved that when the concentration of negatively charged aero ions, known as superoxide anion radicals, when it becomes much lower than 1000 ions per millimeter of air, oxygen molecules are poorly utilized by the organism. And if the net concentration of positively charged aero ions exceeds that of negative ions, a quick death by suffocation can follow. Devices based on his discovery were sold in a number of countries at the end of 1930s. Instead of light, the Chizhevsky chandelier radiated a stream of electrons that joined to oxygen molecules, forming negatively charged oxygen ions. Now, more about Chizhevsky and his background. He belonged to the school of thought, of philosophy known as Russian Cosmism. whose practitioners use the theoretical inquiry and empirical research to explore the history and philosophy of the origin, evolution, and future existence of the universe and humankind. Cosmism, very hard to say, cosmisms drew both from Eastern and Western philosophic traditions. Among its adherents were religious thinkers, philosophers, physical scientists, artists, and poets. Their global approach generated new fields of biological and social study, such as exobiology, biophysics, planetary ecology, geomagnetic biology, and ecological psychology, or the psychology of life environment. Russian cosmism proposes that there is a common evolution of the biosphere and humanity. This notion became a secret impetus for pioneers of the Soviet space program, like Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, who believed that Earth is the cradle for humankind, and that sooner or later we will certainly move into space. Geologist and biochemist Vladimir Vernadsky was a leading light of Russian cosmism. He invented the concept of the biosphere in 1917 and in 1944 introduced the notion of the noosphere. In 1917, communists grabbed control over Russia and Russian cosms were banned. Its practitioners were imprisoned or killed, and the philosophy was largely forgotten. Tsiolkovsky, the proponent of spaceflight and migration to other planets, was fortunate in that he continued his research and writings, and one can see some of the Russian cosmists' idealism in Russia's Star City and the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center. Chizhevsky experienced the heavy hand of communist ideologues to the fullest degree. He was not afraid to defend astrology and wrote that modern scientific discoveries actually bring us back to the knowledge of ancient Middle East. In 1929, he was invited to be a lecturer in biophysics at Columbia University in New York, and also became a member of the French Toulon Academy of Sciences. The Soviet government supported Chizhevsky's research, but could not forgive his independent thinking. He was called a pseudo-scientist and a charlatan, and in 1936 the newspaper Pravda called him an arrogant and false professor. In 1939, Chizhevsky was elected president of the First International Biophysical Congress in New York and was nominated for the Nobel Prize. But the Kremlin would not allow him to travel to the United States. In 1942, Chizhevsky was arrested, and he spent the next 16 years in concentration camps, prisons, and exile. He was finally allowed to return to Moscow in 1958, long after Stalin had died. The brave Russian scientist passed away in 1964. In 1965, the Soviet Academy of Sciences realized the loss they had suffered and created a special commission for full-scale research of Chizhevsky's archives. A small star was named in his honor long after his death. Who remember today those who persecuted him? But the world will remember Chizhevsky. Chizhevsky's ideas about the impact of solar energy on the Earth are especially important now. If we pay heed to Chizhevsky's ideas, we might understand that increases in solar activity create a corresponding growth in Earth's cataclysmic events, earthquakes, droughts, wildfires, the melting of the polar ice caps, volcanic activity, hurricanes, and tornadoes are just some manifestations of the sun's influence. All of them are on the increase, and our Earth is not the only planet of the solar system undergoing such changes. our knowledge of the structure of the sun is incomplete, and much of our present knowledge has been discovered very recently. Chizhevsky never believed that his research projects were finalized, and there may be more discoveries in store for us. And this year, for example, not that long ago, in the summer of 2017, we found out through NASA that sun is about to change form and that the solar minimum is on the way. The sun is heading into a period known as solar minimum, during which activity the surface will change form. And in this time, NASA stated that certain types of activity, such as sunspots and solar flares, will drop. But it's also expected to bring the development of long-lived phenomena, including coronal holes. And I ask you to remember what Chizhevsky was saying. But according to NASA, solar minimum could also enhance the effects of space weather, potentially disrupting communications and navigation systems, and even causing space junk to hang around. The conventional wisdom states that solar activity swings back and forth like a simple pendulum. At one end of the cycle, there should be quiet time with few sunspots and flares, and at the other end, solar maximum brings high sunspot numbers and frequent solar storms. And allegedly, this regular rhythm is to repeat every 11 years or so. But you see, the reality actually is much more complicated. And I urge you to remember Chizhevsky's findings. What's important to us in terms of NASA findings is that there are areas, according to them, in sun's atmosphere where the magnetic field opens up, sending streams of solar particles into space. When the resulting solar wind hits Earth's magnetic field, it can cause space weather events that include geomagnetic storms, disruptions to communications, and even satellites. It can even affect the space debris floating around Earth. So we are only learning about the influence of the sun, and I put more faith in the findings of Chizhevsky than anything else that's being proposed today. Hopefully, there are scientists in Russia who have access to the storage files of the Academy of Sciences and can bring up his long ago stated knowledge, because things are happening and sun is changing, and we need to find out how it's going to affect our planet. Thank you.